We're going to discuss self-construal, and it has two kinds, independent and interdependent. And we'll briefly look at 4 questions related to the self. Individualism versus collectivism, obligation, age, seniority, and the status of women in society. So what is self-construal? Self-construal is how we see ourselves in a network of social relationships. This is a psychological concept, so we can share a little bit about some of the research that psychologists have done with self-construal. And if you're interested in reading a bit more about the concept, you can link to the research provided at the end of the lecture. There are 2 types of self-construal, and people with independent self-construal see themselves as unique. They take responsibility for their own lives and decisions. They act alone. And if you look at their culture broadly, you'll notice that their heroes are individuals. The view of the self is predominant in individualist cultures in North America and Europe. So how do you recognize a person with an independent self-control? The person is likely to first and foremost think about personality traits. Forever, I'm outgoing. Abilities, for example, I'm a great negotiator. And preferences, such as I like or love purple jelly beans, but I dislike green ones. And when people construe the self as independent, then it's really important for them to maintain their autonomy from others because they value things like freedom and choosing their own personal goals. And they, interestingly, feel that leading a pleasurable life is incredibly important. So these people are uncomfortable with punishing others who engage in negative interpersonal behavior and break social norms. Personal pleasures and accomplishments are the primary basis for life satisfaction and well-being. Researchers has consistently found that for people with independent self-controls, personal self-esteem has much more of an impact on their life satisfaction than the quality of their social relationships. So people pay more attention to and more actively pursue personal success with this self-control. People with an interdependent self-control see themselves as part of a larger network of relationships, so more collectivist. And they accept that others take responsibility, share in decisions, the culture's heroes or groups. And the view of self is predominant in East Asian and Latin American cultures. People are thinking about themselves in an interdependent way. They're likely to think first and foremost about their roles in relationships. For example, I'm the youngest son in my family, and their important group memberships are like I'm a sorority sister. People with this view of belonging, friendship, family, safety, and maintaining harmony with others, they're less tolerant of those who break social norms or fail to live up to social obligations. And the research has shown that because of this increased importance on societal obligation, the people with interdependent social control judge themselves through the eyes of others. And they can have negative emotions such as anxiety, guilt, shame, and experience this more frequently and intensely. So on the flip side, there are also emotional benefits to interdependence because they experience less anger because this is predominantly ego-focused as an emotion. And they take greater pleasure and pride in accomplishments of others. And in some ways, they have more opportunities for happiness than if limited to taking pleasure in individual accomplishments alone. So interdependent people are more cooperative than competitive. They work harder at group endeavors, and they're better at resolving social dilemmas. And they also have been associated with better prejudice towards outgroups. So that's something to think about. So when we think about the self, it's important to ask 4 questions. Is the basic unit of society the individual or the collective? Is obligation a burden or a benefit? Is age, seniority valued or discounted? And are women equal or subordinate? Speaking of individualism and collectivism, as you noticed just a bit back in the lecture, we said that independent self-control is predominant in individualistic cultures, whereas an independent self-control is typical of collectivist cultures. But these two sets overlap. For you not to get confused with the difference, think about it this way. Self-control refers to an individual. It's the view that we hold of ourselves. Individual versus collectivism is a term that's used to define the culture as a whole. So briefly, collectivist cultures emphasize cohesiveness, the importance of community. They prioritize the interests of the group over the interests of the individual. And conversely, individualist cultures are focused on the rights and concerns of the individual. They value personal identity and interdependence. And of course, we understand that in any culture we find examples of the opposite. And individualism and collectivism are useful but not perfect concepts. So it's really helpful to think about them as only generalizations, but to be open-minded in case you come across an individual who is from that culture but doesn't quite fit with that definition. So for example, even though we have a lot of examples of collectivist behavior in the United States, most people agree that in the US, by and large, this is an individualist country. So to give you an example of collectivist behavior, there's a picture here of the Maasai ethnic group that inhabits part of Kenya and Tanzania. And they have a really interesting practice when someone in the community does something wrong. And as Leah Pearlman, founder of the Happiness Institute, notes, they take the person to the center of town. The entire tribe surrounds him. For 2 days, they tell the man every good thing he has ever done. And the Maasai believe that every human being comes into the world as good, each of us desiring safety, love, peace, and happiness, but sometime in the pursuit of those things, they make mistakes. And so the community sees misdeeds as a cry for help. So they band together for the sake of the fellow man to hold him up, reconnect him with his true nature, to remind him who he truly is. And until he truly remembers the truth from which he'd been temporarily disconnected. So he remembers, quote unquote, I am good. The next important question to ask is whether the obligation is a benefit or a burden. And obligation may mean a few different things. So, for example, a right in a relationship of being in debt, owing something to someone. This is important. This is an important consideration for many in business interactions. And starting from gift exchange to important business decisions to the quality of long-term relationships. So let's look, for example, at the concept of wasta. It's an Arabic word that can be loosely translated into English as nepotism or who you know. It's a practice of using your connections to get things done. And in many Arab countries such as Oman, Iraq, Lebanon, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Syria, and Jordan, wasta is used for getting hired or promoted in a job. And so interestingly, many countries in other parts of the world have similar practices. For example, Bulgaria, Cuba, Finland, Israel, Spain, Russia, Turkey, Poland, Bosnia, Portugal, Brazil, and Malaysia. One very famous equivalent to wasta in the Asian world, specifically in China, is gunzi. And these practices are based on this idea of tacit mutual connections, tacit mutual commitments, reciprocity, and trust. So it's expected that business partners not only stay friendly with each other, but also reciprocate a favor given by the other party. So if you're planning to do business with one of these countries, it's important to learn about such practices and at least know if it's even possible to do business without engaging in them. The next important consideration when thinking about cultures is how cultures perceive age. Cultures that value age or seniority give the elderly high status and special treatment, especially expected from the offspring who returns care. So older people have power, their words prevail, whereas young people are often ignored. And elderly enjoy freedom to do what they like. Cultures that value youth give young adults admiration for energy, health, vision of the future. And younger people receive special treatment as investments in the future. They would enjoy power, their actions would be impressive, whereas the old would be ignored and discounted. So in these cultures, younger people enjoy freedom to do what they like, when and how and with whom. So China values age, and age is interconnected with rank. Top leader positions are occupied by older men, and in negotiations, Chinese business partners expect the other party to be of at least the same age and rank. The status based on age and rank is so important that it influences how people enter the room, the order of introductions, the amount of respect that needs to be expressed. Last but not least, does gender matter? And women and men's roles vary widely across cultures. So, as one would expect, women's roles are based on physical childbearing and childbearing attributes. Men's roles vary in relation to women's roles. Men's obligation to look after women, protect, provide income, shelter, and food. This will vary according to cultural roles. And research has shown that in cultures where women take on men's roles, they experience stress. And of course, gender considerations are critically important when doing business in regard to leadership interculturally. So, two examples are Japan and the United Arab Emirates, with its most popular city of Dubai. It may be surprising to some to hear that a quote from Steinley in 2014 says that female entrepreneurs in Dubai don't see themselves as needing liberation or having any more challenges when it comes to entrepreneurship than women in major cities of Europe or the US. He interviewed a few business leaders in Dubai. Hazel Jackson, the CEO of a business consulting firm, said, "It's no different than if I were a man. I know this is an unacceptable answer. People want to hear the challenges I faced being a woman in what is perceived to be a male-dominated and closed world. They want the tough story with the incredible breakthrough ending. I've always found that the United Arab Emirates nationals hugely respectful towards women, even before we had free zones and easy routes to setting up businesses. I was encouraged to move to the front of the queue, given preferential service, and treated like a VIP." So interesting. Japanese women, however, struggle with inequality, according to Kincaid in 2019. And they account for only 2% of positions on boards of directors and only 1% of executive committee members. They make up less than 1% of CEOs. So as Venture Japan states, many Japanese salarymen, senior managers, and executives do not find it easy to relate to female executives. And it can present problems for such executives from the US and Europe to do business in Japan. They give a few recommendations for female executives who want to avoid being treated below the corporate level. Look strong, but avoid looking too glamorous. Wear shorter or tied back hair. Wear trouser suits or longer skirts with seasonal colors. Avoid bright handbags in meetings. It's better to use an executive briefcase or shoulder bag. Avoid wearing too much perfume. Consider that most Japanese companies do not allow female employees to wear jewelry or above-the-knee skirts, despite Japanese companies often requiring female employees to wear high-heeled shoes in the office. A foreign female executive should feel free to wear whatever business shoes she feels appropriate. That's it for Module 2 and our cultural classifications. Hope everyone is having a great week, and please take care.